Listen to this podcast, or I'll gut you.
Welcome back, Horror Hounds, to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show podcast.
I'm Mike Ghostman Pickle.
And I'm James Rivera. Today we are going to be doing a special on legendary makeup artist and horror filmmaker JOE CASTRO. We actually had JOE CASTRO on the podcast with us last year. We did an hour-long interview with him that went really in-depth on his career, his influences, his mentorships. So go back and check out JOE CASTRO, the horror show interview, if you're interested in that. But in the meantime, go on.
I was just going to say it's episode 69.
Episode 60. That was already episode 69?
Yeah.
Jesus. So episode 69. Check it out. JOE CASTRO, the horror show interview. Yep, one of our best ones. Today we're going to be discussing Exorcism at 60,000 Feet, which is a film that he served as a makeup artist on. We're going to be discussing that because it's one of his most recent films, and it is probably one of his best movies as far as just pure makeup effects go. And then we will be getting into his directorial efforts, The Summer of Massacre, and the cult classic Terror Toons.
All batshit insane movies in their own way. The ones that JOE CASTRO actually makes himself are definitely more batshit insane than the ones he just does makeup on.
The best way I could describe JOE CASTRO's filmmaking style is he is a total protege of Herschell Gordon Lewis, and he even spoke about this on the podcast when we had him on, how he was influenced by him. And like, for those who don't know, Herschell Gordon Lewis all but invented gore in American films. Movies like Blood Feast were like some of the first, like, I guess you would say like a real slasher movie that would show graphic, detailed murders and killings with incredible makeup effects, especially for something from the 1960s. The stuff is very shocking. It was meant to be in your face and kind of have a titillating quality somewhat, have somewhat of an exploitation quality, emphasizes those elements. And I feel like JOE CASTRO is a true descendant of his mentor, Herschell Gordon Lewis, in terms of the types of films he makes.
Plus the way that he is able to master a low budget.
Yes.
Like, he doesn't care how low the budget is. He's going to make something insane and really entertaining. Like Terror Toons is $2,300 budget, dude. That doesn't even seem like enough to hire the actors.
No, it doesn't, but it's so dementedly imaginative. JOE CASTRO, just as a makeup artist, wonderful makeup artist. If you ever follow him on any form of social media and you see what he does, he creates wonderful pieces of imagination, the monsters that he creates, the originality behind it. He's so dedicated to his art. He is so dedicated to his art as a makeup artist, and the man is wildly creative.
And 35 years, isn't it? Experience in the business, hundreds of projects, and he nails it every time. I don't care what the budget is.
So today will be our JOE CASTRO tribute.
This is the man himself right there.
And behind me is one of his creations. That's Dr. Carnage from Terror Toons.
And Dr. Carnage was designed to the likeness of JOE CASTRO, actually. It's actually supposed to be an exaggerated version of him.
I don't see that at all, but okay.
The first one we're going to talk about is Exorcism at 60,000 Feet. This one is a riot. It's from 2019. It's directed by Chad Farron and written by Robert Ryan, who actually plays the rabbi in the movie, and Daniel Benton. JOE CASTRO is the visual effects supervisor. The synopsis is, on the last flight of a transatlantic passenger airliner, a priest, a rabbi, along with the passengers and crew, fight for survival against a pandemic of demonic possessions. I mean, even the synopsis sounds like a bad joke. Priest and a rabbi on a demon-possessed plane.
And it is very much a pandemic form of possession. It spreads through gas, and people have to cover their mouths in order to hide from it. Kind of weird how relevant it is in today's society.
Yeah. And it has the the great Lance Henriksen as the pilot. Bei Ling from The Crow, she was awesome in this. This is probably even a better performance than The Crow, dare I say. She was actually really good, solid performance, and funny as hell every time she opened her mouth. I was really impressed. You got Adrienne Barbeau with her funny little possessed poodle.
A cult icon. And I have to say, Adrienne Barbeau's poodle is probably the highlight of this movie for me. It had me rolling in laughter.
And the muscle-bound guy with short shorts. And the little person, his actual name, the little person's name is Sammy the Dwarf.
Yeah, that's what he calls
and he's a little person with Tourette's that breastfeeds. So I can tell you what kind of movie this is. It's batshit insane.
And then you got the legendary Bill Moseley too. Let's not forget
Bill Moseley. You got pilots, one of them being Lance Henriksen, pounding liquor and going to sleep while they're flying the plane.
Yeah. So this is a movie this is the type of horror that is meant purely for entertainment. This movie is not designed to scare you. So let's be very clear off the bat. This is not designed to scare you. This is not designed to get under your skin. The purpose of this movie is to use horror images and horror tropes, pump them up to 1,000, not even 10 or 11, like Spinal Tap. Pump it up to 1,000 and see how you react to it. It is fucking funny as hell, and it is a hoot for horror lovers. Let's be honest. This is a comedy that is designed for horror fans. That's how I would describe this. More than a horror comedy, a comedy that's designed to appeal to horror fans, people who understand the iconography of horror, people who are used to the type of imagery you see in horror movies, the type of cliches. Everything about it is primed to appeal to people or to make people laugh, more specifically, who are into the horror genre.
And it's campy, but it's all on purpose.
Yeah, it's all.
You know, that ridiculous bathroom sex scene, and then the priest and the rabbi bonding. It's all hilarious. And the pregnant woman having a demon baby.
It's also and this is very intentional, because this is a relatively new movie. It came out in 2018. It is extremely politically incorrect. It goes out of its way to be offensive, but it's done in such a way that it seems aware of the era that it exists in. It doesn't seem like a lot of movies might be offensive to people if it came out before the modern era because of the types of, just what's normalized in those films. This movie in particular seems like it's more poking fun at the stereotypes. It seems like it's poking fun at stereotypes. It's poking fun at dumb beliefs that people have. There seems to be a little, underneath all the batshit goofiness, a sly little commentary, or at least poking at current politically correct culture in a way that's kind of respectful and never politically incorrect themselves. This movie is loaded with stereotypes, but it doesn't feel like it's making fun of people. It feels more like it's making fun of the stereotypes and poking fun at stereotypes, as opposed to poking fun or punching down at people. It's made with an extra awareness of the environment that it's being released into.
Yeah, and how did they have a little person with Tourette's who breastfeeds? How did they have that without seeming demeaning to him at all?
Well, for one thing, I think Sammy the Dwarf seems to be very much in on the joke and seems to be playing these aspects up to a point where it's so self-aware that that the filmmakers and the people involved know that they're making fun of these stereotypes. And I think that's what makes it work, and it never comes across as tacky or hokey. And they do it with the Asian characters. There's some stuff in here that dips into stereotypes of Asian people, but it's never making fun of Asian people. It's more making fun of the stereotypes that we have of Asian people. Same thing with the Jewish rabbis, with Catholic priests. All of the your preconceived notions, prejudices you might have about different characters, they're played up in a way that's humorous, that's making fun of the prejudice itself rather than the person. And I think that's a lot of what sells the movie, or what makes that aspect of this work.
Yeah, you can tell that the filmmakers aren't prejudiced themselves. They're totally poking fun at the and making it look ridiculous on purpose.
It's fucking absurd. And I don't even know how to describe this movie because in a normal conversation we would try to like break the movie down, tell you what works, tell you what doesn't work. This movie is like 1,000 miles an hour in your face at every second, and it's hard exactly to put into words what makes it work. It's just a series of ridiculous moments that make it all work together. My favorite being Adrienne Barbeau and her fucking poodle.
Yeah.
Fucking poodle. There is a subplot where Adrienne Barbeau has this poodle that ends up inhaling, I guess, the pandemic, a pandemic demon. Is that what?
Yeah.
He inhales the pandemic demon, and it looks so patently fake and so cheesy when the little dog gets possessed and starts flying across, the plane. Hilarious shit. And then you see these big guys trying to tackle this tiny little poodle, trying to get it, and the way it keeps moving everywhere. And then it closes off. And you know what? I'm gonna go in with spoilers for this because the pleasure of this movie isn't like the story twist; it's just witnessing the batshit insanity. The sequence with the poodle closes off with Adrienne Barbeau's scalp being ripped off by the poodle, and it's so funny because the poodle itself looks kind of fake. But the effects makeup when her skull is when the top of her head when she's being scalped by this poodle looks very realistic and very gross and very you could really appreciate the carnage. The way that the scalp comes off, it oozes this thick blood. It doesn't even look like normal blood. It's thick, it's gooey. It kind of emphasizes the absurdity of the situation, but I found that a very funny dichotomy, a very fake looking possessed dog juxtaposed against very realistic looking violent makeup.
That's what I love about Joe Castro. There's a lot of campiness and even ridiculousness going on sometimes that completely takes you out of the movie because it's so ridiculous. And then he throws in a very realistic looking makeup that kind of shocks you when you see it because it's such a stark contrast to the rest of the silly stuff going on. I love when he does that.
I think that's what makes that scene so effective is that everything about it is goofy and campy in the silliest way. And then when the dog gets down to business and rips her scalp off, it's actually pretty graphic. And I wouldn't say realistic because the way that he's making the blood ooze is not realistic. It's extra gooey and slimy. So I wouldn't say it's realistic, but it has more of a tangible feeling to it. It feels a little bit closer to reality than the dog. It's just seeing that nasty, vicious piece of violence after experiencing absurd slapstick just moments before it. Has definitely of a quality like early Peter Jackson, or even like kind of some of the same energy that Sam Raimi had in like Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness. You get the sense of like really playing up the horror and the gore for all it is, but leading up to it with these hilarious slapstick gags that kind of I don't know, the gore seems almost like a punchline to these extended gags that go on.
It's almost like Evil Dead 2 and Airplane. It's got that parody quality to it.
Yeah.
But like the slapstick quality of Evil Dead 2.
Then Bill Moseley in this movie. What the fuck are you doing?
He was hamming it up, and I was loving it, dude.
Yeah, I know that he's Chop Top, which is obviously that character has elements of camp in it, and Otis Driftwood obviously he's funny, but not in a campy way. He's more brutal, harsh humor. It's a little bit more sarcastic. I don't think I've seen him in a movie go for it like this, just having a pure blast. It doesn't seem like he's not taking this too seriously. In the best way possible. Just the presence of him there delivering his ridiculous lines with his ridiculous role that he has is enough to make you smile.
Yeah, and he still has class somehow.
Yep.
He's always poised. He always seems like he's got a very intelligent air about him. Like he's very serious actor even when he's doing these silly things.
Yeah. But the movie is just loaded with funny slapstick gags, over-the-top gore, awesome kill scenes, very weird premise. And I love when this plane is in the air. It's so obviously a CGI plane.
Yeah.
They have these epic shots, and it's obvious you're looking at what almost looks like a video game airplane. and somehow it just fits in with the spirit of the movie.
Yeah, and all with all the gore effects in the movie, I actually, the first time I watched it, I actually left it feeling that I seen a lot more CGI.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I watched it again, there wasn't a whole lot of CGI in the actual gore effects, except for like when the dwarf turned into a demon. That was a little CGI distorted face. But besides that, there wasn't a whole lot of CGI. And I think that the model with the fat tongue, that was actually my favorite effect of the whole thing.
The model with
She just looked gnarly with the face she was making and that big fat forked tongue spilling out of her mouth.
That's a great effect. I also like the Mile High Club scene, the little scene when they're having sex in the bathroom, the airplane bathroom. That effect is awesome. I don't know if there was CGI. If there was, it was probably minimal, but the way that you could kind of see the character as he's having sex melting from the inside, that's the best way to describe it. It seems like all of his insides were melting until he's just nothing but, I don't know, was he like just a pile of flesh and blood by the end of it all? It's just filled with these wildly imaginative pieces of gore.
And yeah, and how many Mile High Club type of scenes have you seen in a movie? And this took that very familiar scene to a whole new level. Very entertaining, very campy movie. But if you look at this movie and you think, oh, that's cheesy, they did it on purpose. Anything you think is cheesy about this, they did it for effect, for a laugh.
If you need your horror ultra serious or ultra dark, or if you need it to take itself seriously all the time, this is not the film for you. However, if you're on the film's wavelength, you're going to have a blast.
A lot of times B-movies are like inexperienced filmmakers doing the best with what they got, with inventive ideas. But this is very competent, skilled filmmakers doing something just totally off the wall. Which is what I like. And that's available on Prime, right?
That's available on Amazon Prime for free if you want to check it out.
So our next one, I had a little bit more problem seeing this one. It's The Summer of Massacre from 2011, written and directed by JOE CASTRO himself. Chapter 1 was written by his writing partner Schroeder. This one, I don't know. It was well. First of all, it was hard to get to. You can only get it on Vimeo. You rent it for $3.99, and Vimeo isn't as efficient as other streaming services as far as getting it on your TV and all that. But it was worth all the trouble I went to. I went through all this trouble to see it. I put it on at pretty close to midnight, and my eyes were wide open through the whole thing. This movie, like, if I say insane or batshit crazy, that does not do this film justice. It's an anthology slasher film featuring,
Calling it what you called it, batshit insane, is an understatement.
Yes.
Batshit insane would think this is batshit insane.
Yeah, you're likely not to have ever seen anything this insane. It's an anthology slasher film featuring 8 killers and 5 gory horror stories. And it's actually in the Guinness Book of World Records for the most kills, most on-screen kills. And boy, does it have a lot of kills. And not only, okay, Joe could have went through this movie and he could have made it a lot easier on himself and a lot less heavy on the CGI, and he could have made a movie with this many kills. But as usual with JOE CASTRO, he went above and beyond. Like a lot of it was almost unnecessary CGI. He just put so much into it. Mm-hmm. He wasn't satisfied with just having an on-screen kill. Every one of them had to be extremely creative, extremely some of it is sadistic, some of it's funny. It's just, I've never seen anything quite like it. And it stars Brink Stevens. She's from a Slumber Party Massacre. And the great Cleve Hall. I love seeing Cleve Hall in this. Cleve Hall is a special effects artist and fabricator. He worked on Ghoulies, Troll, Terror Vision, Demon Wind, Big Ass Spider. And he just died this year at the age of 61. So rest in peace, Cleve Hall. This is the guy that he was so in the horror scene, especially the LA horror scene. Mm-hmm. I saw this guy everywhere at almost every premiere I went to, festival, a convention, anything horror related, he was there, and he was the friendliest guy. He was always the life of the party, and it's just so sad that he's dead. But I really like seeing him in this. He was really good. The film, for me, I had problems with the film at first because it opened up in such an insane way. It's frenetic shit going on, violence, gore, overly loud sound effects, really loud score. A nude woman with big tits being hooked with a giant hook, and that's the indication of what you're in for. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I didn't even know. I was like, has the story started? Everything's going crazy. What is going on?
Yeah, this is the type of movie to me that Herschell Gordon Lewis would have made if he came out in the modern era and had more access to CGI and technology and things like that. And what's interesting is I'm not really a big fan of CGI, especially when you have somebody like JOE CASTRO, who's a brilliant practical makeup effects artist. But one of the reasons that it works in this movie is that the CGI is kind of absorbed into the aesthetic and the look of the film. It's part of the experience. It's part of the batshit insanity. A lot of the reasons that CGI in horror movies doesn't work is because it's not part of the aesthetic. It seems to come out of nowhere when it happens, especially when you see a movie where there's good like practical effects and then the CGI makeup comes out and it becomes glaring or it becomes obvious or it takes you out of the movie. This movie sets it out like makes it a part of its aesthetic and from the insanity from the very beginning that it starts to feel a part of an experience, not so much an intrusion as it does in a lot of movies. Here, I think that's why it works, because it's part of the kineticism of the movie. It's part of the energy. It's part of the batshit insanity. Here I am mispronouncing words like an idiot. But it is made with this kind of boundless enthusiasm where I could see a makeup artist, a gifted makeup artist like JOE CASTRO sitting down and was like, how am I going to get to 155 kills in the most efficient way possible? What excuses could I make to make this kill and make this kill? And what makes this interesting, like you said, these aren't just like, here's a kill, let's move on to the next one until we break the record. Each kill is extremely graphic. It's over the top. They're wild. They're imaginative. There are even some. JOE CASTRO does do some practical effects in here that are pretty good. That mix in pretty well with the CGI. That's the interesting thing. You can mix practical effects in with the CGI aesthetic and make it effective, but you can't do it the other way around.
Yeah,
it doesn't work the other way around. But he does that. He does. It's like the movie just keeps throwing one thing after you add another that your head starts spinning at the sheer amount of creativity that went into all the kill scenes of this movie. It's very much a horror movie made by a horror makeup effects artist, made by somebody who wants to show you all of the crazy shit that he has going on in his head. Must have been a pretty cathartic experience for JOE CASTRO too, because you could go further in CGI than you could even with makeup. So things that get really over the top get really, really, really over the top. But it's all part of the energy of the movie. It's all part of the aesthetic. It's all part of what JOE CASTRO's vision. And I can imagine it was cathartic for an artist who is used to working slower with makeup effects just to make something right, to have access to this type of technology where you could just anything that you want to imagine on screen, it's there no matter what it is, no matter how over the top, no matter how fucking insane it is, we have the ability to show it.
But when I heard that it was 155 on-screen kills, I'm like, all right, this isn't even going to be a movie. It's just going to be kill after kill. I'm down with that. But it's 5 separate stories, and it tells each story. It takes the time to tell each story and give you an idea of what's going on in this story instead of just kill, 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 kill. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to do something with chapter 1, which I'm not going to do with the rest of it. I'm going to go into detail in chapter 1 just to give you an idea. I want to tell you about the first 15 minutes of this film. And then I won't go into that much detail on the rest. I just want to give people an idea of what to expect from this. This is the first 15 minutes. Chapter 1 is Rampage, okay? A guy gets attacked on his run. So a group of guys jabs his eye out, stabs his cheek, and rips his face open. The guy then gets disoriented, and he's traumatized by what just happened to him. So he then bashes a woman's head in, rips her scalp off, shoves it into her mouth, punches the guy's binocular into his eyes, smashes a kid's head with his own skateboard, stabs a male lady in the eye and the chest with a stick, rips a woman's throat, punches the lady's eye out at a yard sale, then turns around and stabs her husband's head in half, smothers a guy with a bag of ice, then smashes his face in with it, smashes a bum's head with his own beer, smashes a mechanic's head with a car press, jabs a screwdriver through another mechanic's eye, breaks the guy's legs off, bashes a woman's face with a pipe wrench. And that's just the first 15 minutes.
That's just the first 15 minutes, and that's just going over the gore scenes. You forget that this opens with a with some very graphic male nudity that you're not used to seeing in horror movies. Usually, it seems to be more of a thing these days, but in horror, it's traditionally mostly you see female bodies or you get lingering shots of like the female form. This one opens up with an extended scene where you see the main actor of Rampage walk around naked. And I think even that announces what type of movie this is. Where it's like, we are not here to make you comfortable. We're here to fuck with you. We are going to do everything in our power to make sure that your eyes are wide open through this entire experience. Make sure that you know that you're not in for a normal experience. And I think it's very telling. The movie doesn't say, like a film by Joe Castro or different ways people like a Joe Castro film, or Spike Lee likes to do a Spike Lee joint. This is a Joe Castro experience, and that is probably the best way to describe it. It is a experience, an experience that Joe Castro just wants to have the viewer and shake them up for an hour and a half and just show them all kinds of crazy sights and show you things that you've never seen in a horror movie before.
Some of the CGI and outrageous kills are so ridiculous and over the top that it almost takes you out of the movie in a way. Mm-hmm. But about halfway through the movie, I felt myself feeling the shock and awe and being disturbed, just as if it all looked real. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you're so immersed in this depravity. And like you said, the CGI kind of fits the whole look of the whole thing. So you start feeling these deaths. Mm-hmm. When at first you're completely taken out of it because of the zaniness of it. But by the end of it, I was totally invested and I was feeling like skeeved out in a good way. After that first 15 minutes, that Rampage wasn't over. So there's a couple things that happened at the end of this first short. I love the carrot peeler stabbing. Joe Castro finds the best weapons mm-hmm. to kill people with. The carrot peeler stabbing and the man ripping his own face off, which was better than the man ripping his face off in Poltergeist, dare I say. Mm-hmm. It looked more gnarly. It looked more nasty. It looked scarier. It looked like a guy ripping his flesh off.
And I think the reason it's better than the Poltergeist scene is because this isn't and Poltergeist is a classic, don't get me wrong, but it's still a studio movie with a lot of overhead and a lot of corporate suits who wanted to make sure that that movie was accessible, across generations. That's a generational horror film. You could watch it with like kids, grandparents, parents. Joe Castro does not have that kind of overhead. No. Is concerned with studio things and is not trying to make a family movie. What he is trying to do is make a gory horror movie for gorehounds, for horror fans. This is not for your grandma. This is not to watch with the family or your kids. This is for hardcore horror fans and gorehounds. There's no attempts to make this remotely studio at all or to try to make it accessible to the general public. And I think that's another reason that I really appreciate it about it. Another thing, damn, I'm mixing up my words. That's another thing I really appreciated about it. It's a completely uncompromised vision.
Yeah. I usually don't like a lot of heavy CGI, but in order to pull something like this off, he had to use CGI, but I'm not even sure I could handle it if it all looked real. There's enough of it already that looks real.
I think it might be overwhelming to the audience. I think if this movie were all practical effects and everything looked realistic, it might become nauseating after a while, and I think it would lose some of its sense of the sense of zaniness or the sense of fun or the spirit it has. It would probably make it a heavier movie to digest.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what the experience is going for. I think this is meant to overwhelm you, but not overwhelm you where you feel like disgusting. Overwhelm you like to the point where you're like, what the fuck am I watching? What's going on? There's a different type of overwhelm. I do think that it would have gave this movie a completely different feel, and I think it would have been a little bit less fun if it were practical effects.
It actually makes it more entertaining that some of it is so off the wall.
Mm-hmm.
So then we come to chapter 2, which is Lump. This starts with a killer talking about killing. So between each segment, you got a different killer talking about how good it feels to kill. Mm-hmm. And on this one, I love this one. I actually know this guy, this Joe Manetti.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy is hilarious. If you get a chance, hook up with this guy and check out his Facebook page. He's always like destroying haters. He's always like making all these crazy jokes, and he's got a really cool sense of humor. So it was really cool seeing him play a sadistic.
He's a troll basher.
Yeah, he is.
He trolls the trolls, and the trolls don't know how to handle it. That's how I would describe that guy.
That guy is awesome. So it's cool seeing him in this, and he actually played a really good killer. The story he was telling was really effective, and I felt it. So then that kind of goes into the story about of Lump, about a disabled girl with spinal bifida and a huge lump on her head. It's a huge, nasty, squishy lump too that looks like it's going to burst at any minute. And then she has a mean sister who tries to kill her because she's a nuisance. Mm-hmm. And just a nasty character that sister is. And this is the one that has Brink Stevens, who plays the mom, and she was really good. And the bad sister, I love when the bad sister starts looking for everyone, because they take her out in the middle of the woods and she pushes her off a cliff. Mm-hmm. So the girl with spinal bifida, some reason when the big lump burst, she's able to have strength and walk around. She was in a wheelchair before. So I love when this really cool little scene, you got the bad sister kind of climbing over a fence and walking into a little clearing, and then the wheelchair comes rolling down the hill. I thought that was very effective. And then the crows eating the guts mm-hmm. of the crows eating the guy's guts. And then my favorite was at the end. I won't give details of what it is, but the bear hug from hell.
Oh yeah,
like there's a kind of a bear hug that splits somebody, and that looked pretty gnarly and pretty real, like someone's back breaking completely the other way. That was awesome.
That looks practical to me. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that one was achieved practically. I didn't really detect any CGI from that moment. I could be wrong.
Yeah, didn't that look just nasty, and you could feel it, like the back cracking? Ugh.
Yeah.
And then the next one is when it really started getting depraved. Chapter 3 was Son of Boogeyman. It's a man goes on a date and tells his date about his past, and you find out that his father is a vicious killer who tortured his mom and continues to do so. You got this big monstrous man just brutally killing people, and then the cops come after him and they shoot his head completely apart. So he's walking around. This is one thing I don't understand how Joe Castro does. You've got a big hulking killer walking around killing people, and his face is shot apart. It's hanging open, and you can see the depth in the face. Mm-hmm. How does he do that? It looked like a guy with his face hanging open.
That was achieved practically. That I'm pretty sure that moment was achieved practically.
Yeah.
I think even before he gets into that moment, that's probably the most disturbing thing in the movie is the father. Because he's described as a man who is just abusive, but when you see him, he looks barely human. He looks like a Humpty Dumpty style of monster. That's the best way I could describe it. Like a demented version of a fairy tale. He seems like a fairy tale monster, not like a human being. Yeah.
And my favorite kill on that one is a seatbelt kill. He the killer kind of wraps the seatbelt around somebody's head and then pulls it like this, and you see their flesh like oozing out between the seatbelt. It just keeps getting crazier and crazier as this short goes on. And that ending kind of disturbed me, even though there was CG blood flying everywhere.
Mhm.
It's like this person gets their face bitten off, and then their head is ripped off, and then it just starts squirting blood all over the hospital, and you kind of float through the halls of the hospital, and everything's soaked with blood. It's so chaotic and nasty. That was a pretty good one. The next one was chapter 4. This one was called Burn. This is the one that stars Cleve Hall. Cleve Hall plays a guy who runs a religious camp where they sing religious hymns around the campfire. And then when Cleve goes to bed, the others kind of puff on a joint and tell the story of a gay couple, and one of them is Joe Castro, a gay couple who is burned alive and come back from the dead to get revenge. The moment I love the most in that was they're in the middle of telling the story and smoking and everything, and then kind of Cleve Hall comes and ducks his head in to finish the story.
Yeah.
Like you think he's uptight, he's not for any of that. And then he kind of pops his head in to tell the rest of the story. I thought that was pretty funny. The gnarly ankle cut. You've seen some of those, especially the one that comes to mind is Pet Sematary. But this one looked nasty. He rakes across those ankles and they just open up. They look like they hurt. After the ankle cut, you see some Joe Castro. Joe Castro was really good, and he was a handsome man.
Yeah.
This one ended with some awesome fire effects. I was very impressed with those. I've seen a lot of CG fire effects, and I've seen movies where the fire is supposed to be 100% real, and it didn't look as real as this. It looked like tangible. It looked like it had heat to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's really good CGI fire. Those kind of fire effects kind of continued into the final chapter, chapter 5, the warehouse. And I thought this was pretty inventive. You know, all the killers that talk between the segments, they all gather at the end. So all the killers we saw between all the shorts converge in a warehouse. And it's a pretty chaotic short where they all get lit up by the cops. And it has this literally explosive ending that I thought was pretty cool.
That also has some of the most over-the-top scenes. I feel like this is where he fit in a lot of kills where the CGI becomes CGI on top of CGI on top of CGI in this warehouse until I had to pause it, actually, to try to take in what I was looking at. There is so much insanity going on in that warehouse. So many naked bodies hanging on hooks. So many different, it's almost indescribable, the amount of detail that you feel like you are just looking at a collage of carnage and gore, and it's hard to even make out what's going on. You have to look at every center of the frame. You're like, okay, there's a dead body, and this is how this was killed. This was how this was killed. But when you first see it, it's just like this overwhelming, just pure carnage filling up the screen.
Yes, and it's all on purpose. It's all to the effect that Joe Castro wants. Do not listen to the critics when it comes to Joe Castro. Do not listen to the a-holes on IMDb, because I read some of those reviews of people who watched his movies on IMDb, and they just tear him apart as if the campiness wasn't intentional,
Mm-hmm.
as if he's just making cheap movies. That's not what this man is doing. There's nothing cheap about Summer of Fear. I mean, sure, you might look at first glance, you know, some of the CGI looks cut and paste and stuff like that, but it's a damn impressive movie. It took a lot of work to put this thing together.
Summer of Massacre. You called it Summer of Fear for a second.
Oh, yeah, because I kept seeing Summer of Fear when I was looking for it. So, yeah, Summer of Massacre.
Summer of Massacre. Yeah, I could see how these movies aren't for everybody, but you have to recognize that these movies are made with a certain type of spirit. The idea is that Joe Castro wants to overwhelm you with his craft. He wants you to feel like you are getting a sort of sensory overload for his craft.
Any shortcomings of Joe Castro's movies comes from the budget, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't care what the budget is either. If he doesn't have enough budget to put shit on screen, he's going to find a way to put it on there anyway. That's another thing that's great about Joe Castro.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, my take on Summer of Massacre, tons of great kills, brutal violence, blood, gore, practical effects, lots of CGI, cleverly twisted ideas, an imagination much bigger than the budget, and I don't mind at all. Balls out depravity with just enough fun to make it an enjoyable experience. Even if some of it feels a little too depraved and wrong, but it's depraved and wrong in a good way.
I really enjoyed this one too, and I really enjoyed Exorcism at 60,000 feet. But this last one, I think, is Joe Castro's best work, and we'll get into why.
Yes. Now I've seen this one a few times. Toons from 2002, and we mentioned it on the podcast before. I'm very familiar with this one because I was testing out my filmmaking skills with two other friends, and we made this stupid little movie called Playbox 420. It's a dumb stoner movie, and we needed some TV footage for the character to be watching, so we added some Toon stuff. So I've liked this for a while, but watching it this time, I think I liked it even more, and I really want to see 2, 3, and 4 now. Joe Castro is the director, co-writer, producer, special effects coordinator, and gore effects. Original concept by special effects artist Mark Villalobos, and co-written by Rudy Bali and Stephen J. Escobar. This one stars Beverly Lynn. I have a renewed crush on this woman every time I watch this movie. She is so beautiful and so cute. So Beverly Lynn and Lizzie Borden. And for some reason, I didn't find out until this time that these are porn stars. They've both been in, I think Beverly Lynn's been in like 100 movies, and Lizzie Borden's been in like 40, but they're almost all porn films. A couple other pretty interesting cast members on this one. One of them is Brandon Ellison. He plays he plays the main guy that comes over to the girl's house. He is also a part of the special effects crew. And right after this movie, a year later, he did the effects on Pirates of the Caribbean, then Van Helsing and The Watchmen. And Watchmen, I mean. And also the drag queen performer Shimmy Matz plays the mom. And I thought he was hilarious. So the synopsis is, Candy and Cindy's parents go out of town. So older sister Cindy and her friend decide to invite guys over to play strip Ouija, while Candy sits in her room watching the mysterious Toons DVD she got in the mail. Soon, the homicidal Toons, Dr. Carnage, and Max Assassin are unleashed in the real world, turning a fun night of sexy games into a living nightmare.
Okay. So did you know, all right, so this gives you the sense of humor that this movie has. You know how they want to play strip Ouija? This results from an argument between the guys and the girls. The guys want to play strip poker, of course, because they want to see the girls get naked. And the girls want to have fun and play Ouija, so they decide to do strip Ouija. Did you see how Ouija was spelled on the board?
Ouija?
Ouija is not how Ouija was spelled, and I'm totally convinced that was 100% intentional. That's just a funny little gag that the movie has going for it. So that kind of tells you that the sense of humor this movie has. This is my favorite of the three movies that we are discussing, and I think it's because this movie is fucking demented. That's just the only way that I could put it. It is demented in the most fun and playful way possible. It reminds me a lot of Looney Tunes, and I think that's kind of intentional by calling it Toons. It reminds me of Looney Tunes, the type of humor that you would see, the way that the characters behaved. And a lot of the Looney Tunes, those Warner Brothers cartoons, some of those characters had a sadistic bent in the way that they played around with other people and the types of games that they played. A lot of old cartoons like that have a vaguely sadistic bent that if you're like watching them now, you see things that they're doing. It's like, wow, that's pretty dark for a character in a children's animation cartoon to be doing. So what Joe Castro seems to be doing with this movie is taking that concept and going like, well, all of these characters were like a step away from becoming horror movie villains based on their sadism and the way that behaved. Even Bugs Bunny could be a little bit like playing head games. What if we just push it a little bit further in that direction and let them just go all out? That's kind of what you get with Toons, is if the Looney Tunes cartoons gave into their sadistic aspects a little bit more, you would get something like this.
Yeah, like the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote.
Yeah,
he does some pretty sadistic stuff sometimes.
The types of games that he plays, the stuff that Bugs Bunny does to Elmer Fudd when he's being hunted down, these things that are very sadist, and this has that exact spirit, but more wrong. One of the things that I love about the movie is that it's very low budget, and it looks low budget, but the aesthetic works perfect for something that's cartoons. The backgrounds and like the house have this very stripped down, bare quality to them, And the colors that they use are not colors that you typically see in a household. The walls don't look like a normal household don't look like what walls would look like in the normal household. They have this very pastelish kind of feel to it, very boxy and very plain, but it reminds me a little bit of animation. Even though most of the movie is not animation, it has the quality and the feel of animation. And the characters themselves, who are Dr. Carnage and Max Assassin,
Yeah.
those two characters, when they come out of the cartoons that one of the characters is watching, the Terror Toons, they step out into the real world. They still look like cartoons with their simplistic drawings and their designs and everything, the way that they step into the real world. But they feel like such a natural fit for the house that they're stuck in. The house itself feels like you're stuck in a live action cartoon setting. That's the best way I could describe it. The movie really sells its animation aesthetic without using hardly any animation at all.
And I love that outrageous design of Dr. Carnage and Max Assassin, where Dr. Carnage has that cackle all the time and those big teeth, and then Max Assassin is always laughing at the stuff they're doing and biting his fingers. They're cool, fully realized characters, like cartoon characters.
That's what I found is so demented, is that they have a quality to them that's cutesy like cartoon characters, but they seem genuinely sadistic. There's one scene in particular that I thought was really effective, where they show up into the real world, cartoon characters that they are, and they start making all the characters in the movie, they're laughing like they're sitting and laughing at cartoons, and they keep going and going, where one guy keeps laughing and laughing harder until you could see that it's starting to like physically damage him, and you could see him kind of like melting from the inside in this uncontrollable laughter. The way that they kind of gloat over it and they're excited to see him laugh himself to death, the way that he kind of becomes the way that they use that gore effects makeup to kind of kill that character off. There's something very disturbingly demented about seeing cute cartoon characters excited for their sadism, excited to see you suffer, excited to see you feel tortured. It's like a really bad nightmare that you would have on acid after watching too many Looney Tunes cartoons at night. Imagine staying up late at night, watching way too many Looney Tunes cartoons, probably tripping on acid. You fall asleep, you'd probably have a nightmare that's similar to this.
Yeah, and I love how they make the character, like they tie the characters up and make them watch them perform. So they actually approach it in a way like they're showing a presentation to them, like they want to entertain them, but no, they just want to freak them out and kill them. But yeah. I loved all the little performances and that they did, and the sawing the girl in half, that literally sawed her in half.
I love how they use one of the characters as a puppet after ripping her spine out. Only Joe Castro would have come up with something like that. They just rip her spine out and then they just puppet her and have her talk. I really like that weird effect when that character is a puppet. Her mouth looks like it's slit open, and when it opens, you see nothing but pure black. It's a very really cool little integration of very subtle animation juxtaposed on a real person's face that makes it just seem slightly off. You know, it reminds me of the way the slits on the mouth and the way it opens up, it's all black. You've seen South Park, the way that they draw Canadians on there.
Oh, yeah.
It kind of reminds me of that, except a little bit more demented than, quite a bit more demented than that is actually.
And that was made me even more effective because you just got through seeing a very, very well done spine cut. It, like, you couldn't see, it was seamless. You couldn't see where the dummy was and where the girl's head was. You couldn't see, like, which one was which. It totally looked like part of her body. It looked like they were digging into her back and cutting it open. Mm-hmm. And then just reaching his hand up there and just ripping the spine out and holding it up. Mm-hmm. And then you think the effect is done, and then the girl starts talking with that weird doll effect to her mouth, and then you see him pull his hand out of her back. Oh, it's gnarly. It's so awesome. Yeah. And then
go on.
I love how the first scene opens up. That's another thing Joe Castro does. In the first scene, he shows you what you should expect. First scene, a guy in a cartoon dimension is tied down, shocked, shot in the head, cut open, and his guts pulled out.
Mm-hmm.
And then Terror Toons, welcome.
Yeah.
So then that leads right into, I was cracking up right away. That leads right into the little sister, Cindy, has pigtails, and acts like a little kid, but she has these big fake boobs. And then you see the mom is an obvious drag queen.
Mm-hmm.
And then it shows the whole entire sections of the movie of the girl watching the cartoon. So you're actually kind of immersed in the cartoon as if you're watching a whole episode of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get pulled into the real world.
That's what I find interesting. The real world already has a cartoon aesthetic to it in this movie. It has it feels like a cartoon come to life, so it seems more natural. When the Toons step out of the television, it doesn't feel like they're artificial to the world that they're stepping in. They kind of feel like they belong there. So it I don't know. It's I know I overuse this term a lot, but it has a kind of surreal quality to it. I don't think I've ever seen a movie that's a horror movie, especially, that tries to replicate the feeling of what it's like to watch a cartoon, but push it in a much more demented direction, and to use very little animation in it as well. The only times you see like full-on animation in this movie is like when the little sister is watching the Terror Toons. You see these like demented little segments, and of course the part when they go to hell and meet the devil.
Yeah.
Quite a bit of animation there, but it makes you feel like you're watching a perverted cartoon even when you're not looking at any form of cartoonery going on. It still has that feeling, it still has that spirit, it still has that kind of energy to it.
And another thing I loved about it, the kills were like gnarly and nasty and cool, but some of the weapons were like these oversized cartoon weapons. I love that. Like he cuts the guy's head off with a big giant pair of scissors. I love that effect. I love when he cuts the pizza guy with a giant pizza cutter.
Yeah, really quick. The guy who gets his head cut off with scissors, did you rewind that like I did? I don't know how that effect was achieved. It looks like I rewound it to try to figure out what's going on in that scene, because it's obviously the actor acting with his head, and it looks like it just got chopped off. So I don't know what he did there, but I rewound that a couple times to try to figure out what was going on, but I couldn't figure out what trick he used to make that look like a real decapitation.
Yeah, there was a few times that, like, how many B movies like this or campy movies are you gonna watch and then sit there and pick out so many effects? Like, shit, how did he do that? Like, I've seen a lot of behind the scenes stuff and a lot of effects being done. I can't see how he did it.
I'd hesitate to call it a B movie. And the main reason is my impression of a lot of B movies, they're made strictly because there's cheap and there's profit to it. This movie has too much of a very designed aesthetic to it. It has a very specific look. It has something that most B movies, especially modern day B movies, don't have: a vision to it. There is very much. This is very much the vision of the filmmaker. It's very controlled, and it's made with a ton of care and a ton of love. Where I don't feel like a lot of B movies, you get that feeling out of it. It feels like a movie. It feels something like a passion project. It's loaded with imagination. And there are kind of things that I could compare it to a little bit, like I guess The Evil Dead 2 or something like that. But I think what makes it stand apart is I can't think of any horror movie that's exactly like this one. I can't think of any other horror movie that applies that kind of Looney Tunes cartoon aesthetic to this type of sadism that you see in this movie, the level of sadism. It has a feel all its own. It doesn't feel like any other movie that I've seen in my life that I could think of. The only thing that you'd probably be able to compare it to is the sequels to this film.
Yeah.
That's probably the only point of reference or the closest thing that you could compare it to. But other than that, it doesn't feel like any kind of horror movie I've ever seen before. It belongs in a world all its own.
Another part I love is, like, they have a guy laying on the table and Dr. Carnage is slowly kind of cutting into his head, and he cuts around, pulls his scalp off to show his skull, cuts into his skull, and it's so calculated. Cuts into his skull, takes the top of his skull off, and it's all that stringy, like,
matter sticking to it.
nasty brain matter coming out, and he pulls it out, and then he's so slow and calculated. You're like, all right, where's he going with this? What's he doing?
And he starts
And then
tickling.
he pulls the top of the head off, and then he goes tick tick tick, and starts tickling the brain.
And the guy starts laughing. He's obviously hitting a part of the brain that's making him laugh. And it's weird. It's kind of funny in that cartoon kind of way, but it's almost kind of sickening to see such cutesy cartoon characters fucking around inside somebody's head and making him laugh. And it's obviously, it's not joyful laughter. It looks like painful laughter. You know that what he's going through is painful. I don't know. There's just, I don't know how to describe it, but it's just, the characters are so fucking cartoony. The way that they look, the way that they're drawn, the way that they're streamlined, the way that they look in the real world, that it's more perverted and wrong than a horror villain that looks outwardly terrifying. The fact that it looks so goofy and has such a cutesy quality to it, I think makes the sadism seem a little bit more perverted or wrong. There's something, I don't know. It always gets. I don't. I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way, but there's something very effective about seeing very sadism carried out in a very gleeful, happy, cheerful, excited, almost childlike manner.
Yeah, because the cartoon characters, they're still in a cartoon, but their victims are in the real world, and they're feeling real horror and real pain.
Or another point I read, it's almost like Itchy and Scratchy.
Yeah, exactly.
Itchy and Scratchy came out and started playing the games that they play on Itchy and Scratchy from The Simpsons playing in the real world. It would be horrifying. The way that they that's another good way to describe it. The Itchy and Scratchy characters came to life and started behaving very sadistically in the real world.
It's even more like Itchy and Scratchy than it is about the Warner Brothers cartoons, because Itchy and Scratchy is actually just kind of a parody of the Warner Brothers cartoons, taking it very literal and brutal. But then this is like the live version of that, live action. Yeah.
So Terror Toons has kind of become a cult film. I've noticed that it has like a cult reputation, and I could totally see why. Everything about this screams cult classic, and I think the fact that it's kind of it stands out amongst horror cult films. I've never seen one that functions the way this one does.
Yeah, and I like all the little subtle things too. There's one little subtle part that I absolutely love. You know, when they're in the house and they first realize, oh shit, these cartoon characters are trying to kill us. So they start to go out the door, and then you see when you open the door or look through one of the windows, there's those spirals, the kind of hypnotic spirals. And then not only that gave me like a cool feeling, like they're trapped in there. The cartoon characters have kind of brought their dimension into this world. So it gave me that feeling. And also I love the little effect where the guy opens the door and he sees a spiral right there, and he looks at it for too long, so he gets dizzy and falls down and starts puking. That was such a clever idea.
I think that also lends the element of surrealism to it, because the real world already has a cartoony aesthetic. So when the cartoons bleed in and they kind of bring their dimension or their universe where they can't even step outside the house because it swirls everywhere, it lends it a very off-kilter feel to it. And what's amazing about that is it gives you a very off-kilter, surreal vibe on an extremely low budget. Usually, in order to achieve that surreal kind of effect, that feeling of being trapped in a universe that's alien to your own, it requires more of a budget, usually requires just a lot more than what this movie has. And it manages to create a world that feels all its own with very little money.
Yeah, I mean, come on, $2,300 budget? I saw $2,300 in the first 10 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, $2,300. So that's just $2,300.
Yeah, here I'm all proud of ourselves because we made a feature film for $4,000. Shit, it didn't have half of those shit that this did. All those effects and stunts and creating entire worlds.
Yeah, in fact, you made me a little envious when you pointed that out. I was like, fuck, he had half of our budget and created a universe that's all good. Yeah, but
Even when you mentioned one of the characters goes to hell, I thought that was really cool looking, really effective, and the devil was awesome. The devil was played by Jack Roberts. I loved his. It was kind of funny, but mostly serious, and to the point where I can't believe this was his only film. It's the only thing he's ever done. The guy that played the devil. I thought that was a really good devil. But overall, I thought the writing was pretty clever and funny for what it is. And as usual, a lot of cool ideas going on in the effects design and the kills. And a lot of balls out, campy, and trashy fun. Not for everyone, but definitely for me.
Yeah, definitely for me. Like I said, I think that this is and I enjoyed all three films, but I think that this is the best one of the bunch. And I think it's because the experience of the movie is so singular and unlike anything I've ever seen before, that as much as I try to compare it to different horror movies, I can't find anything that matches up with what this movie is doing, that even attempts to do the same thing that this movie is doing. So its cult reputation is very deserved. And like I said, Summer of Massacre is a blast too, and I love Exorcism at 60,000 feet. But I think what makes this one the real standout is that it creates a world all its own. And I think anytime a movie can create a world, a universe that doesn't feel like the one that you lived in, especially on a budget for fucking pennies like this,
yes,
that is an accomplishment right there.
Like I don't see how he does it.
I don't either.
And could you imagine what this man could do with a real budget? Like, give him real budget, top-notch equipment and supplies and time to do it. Do you imagine what this man could do?
Can only imagine.
The sky's the limit.
The sky's the limit. But part of me wonders if his budget limitations is what keeps him so fucking creative and what keeps his effects makeup so keeps the ingenuity of his effects makeup. There's almost like a wizard-like quality to the way he works and the way he creates. So like, if you ever follow him on any form of like social media, like Instagram or Facebook, he's always posting the different monsters that he's created, different creations. He seems like he's always coming up with something new in his head. Whatever he can get out, he's always creating the costumes that he creates for Halloween. He is extremely imaginative. He has a lot going on upstairs.
And I believe he booted off or suspended off Facebook a couple times just for posting pictures of his effects because it looks so real. Like,
what I also like about them is his effects. I imagine he might have been kicked off here. Well, not kicked off, but you know how they put you on the Facebook ban. Some of his effects are gory and disturbing with a touch of kink.
yes.
There's a touch of kinkiness to some of the effects that he does where there's like this vaguely playful there's like the sexual element at play. And I imagine juxtaposing that with a lot of horrific monsters and a lot of like things that don't exist in the real world and like horrifying graphic imagery probably unsettles a lot of people. But
Yeah.
I think it's kind of brilliant though.
But the nudity and the sexual part of it never seems gratuitous. It always seems to fit in with everything else.
Yeah, I agree. Those are the 3 Joe Castro films we decided to discuss. 2 that he directed and 1 where he just did fantastic makeup effects on. They all have the same kind of spirit. They all have the same kind of energy. They all have a touch of camp. They're all fun. But like I said, Terror Toons is the standout here.
Yeah, and Terror Toons is also available on Amazon Prime.
Amazon Prime. I need to reach out to Joe Castro about Terror Toons because I actually would really, really like to own a copy of that movie. And I think it's out of print. It's really expensive and it's hard to find. But you could watch it for free on Amazon Prime.
But I'm going to seek out the rest now. I can't believe I never seeked them out before because I've seen Terror Toons a couple times before. But now I really want to see 2, 3, and 4.
So
they both have the same 2 sisters are coming back for 2, 3, and 4. I don't know how Candy's going to come back, but it'll be fun to watch.
Yep, we'll see. So we hope you enjoyed our little Joe Castro special. We sure hope that he enjoys it as well. Hey, Joe Castro. Keep up with us. We started a Facebook group that's slowly building for our podcast, Ghostman Rivera's Horror Show podcast. If you're interested, look it up. send us a request and we'll go in and we'll approve you. Follow us on Facebook. Facebook.com/Pickles Horror Show. There, we're going to keep you updated with everything that we're working on with Michael Pickles' debut feature film, Pay Up. Feature-length debut, I should say. You've made short films before that. Feature-length debut. Right now, we're working on that out to the festival circuit. We have a couple of scripts that we're working on currently. Something that Michael might be able to direct very soon. Just keep up with us in general. We'll keep you updated on the podcast, any film projects we're working on, the status of our horror variety series horror show that Mike and I do, where we write and direct short films and segments and different news segments. We'll keep you up to date on the status of that and anything else we're doing. Also, click on our flow page in our description, and if you can't click on it, just copy and paste it into your browser, and it'll give you a link to everywhere a podcast is available, whether it's YouTube if you want to watch it, or if you want to listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or SoundCloud. At the moment, currently working on getting it towards Anchor and other platforms, so please keep following us.
Yes, and please join our Facebook group. We just started it. We don't let just anybody in. It's not open to the public. We only let people in who listen to the show and interact with us. So come on there. We really want to make this group have it a place for the listeners of the show to be more of a part of the show and interact with us. Tell us what they think of our opinions, or tell us movies that they want us to review.
Well, we're open to suggestions. We're going to be doing a lot of questions. Like, you can suggest topics for us. You can tell us when you disagree with us. You could tell us if you think we got something wrong. Just keep following us and we'll keep you up to date. Till next week, folks. Happy horror.
Happy horror.